Troutwine with Offshore Engineer TV, and we're very pleased to be joined today by Mads Hjelmeland, Managing Director, Processing Systems, OneSubsea. Mads is due to outline his views on low carbon production systems and sustainability at this year's Underwater Technology Conference, June 16 and 17, but he's here with us today to discuss subsea factories and how their role is creating or helping to create a net zero world. I must admit that when talk turns to decarbonization and lowering emissions, that subsea processing is not the first thing that crosses my mind. How does subsea processing fit into that conversation?
I think that's a great point, Greg, and as in my mind, subsea processing fits perfectly into the conversation. So I think we have a good starting point for a discussion, right? So first, I think that it's essential in this discussion that we focus on energy and really how we can optimize the use of this energy, right? So subsea processing has a great potential to be an enabler for low carbon production for a number of reasons, right? And I'll get to them in a minute. In general, I'd say that subsea developments have a significantly lower carbon footprint as compared with, call it, conventional topside developments, as we're installing the production as well as any potential subsea processing system on the seabed. And by doing this, we're able to create value by enabling a significant improvement in the recovery while at the same time using much less energy. If we then look at the conventional way of producing subsea oil fields, either through gas lifting fluids or other topside process solutions, experience actually shows that subsea processing technology can reduce the carbon footprint by as much as 50 to 80% in comparison, which is a significant value, right? And if you look further at this and you really leverage the subsea factories and processing technologies on the seabed to replace floating hosts and facilities, then you see significant savings, not only related to the life of field emissions or the production phase, if you like, but also the efficiencies through the engineering and build phase, right? So in my view, some of the current subsea to beach solutions are maybe good examples in this context. The Hjelmeland phase 3 project, which is currently underway, is maybe one example where subsea multi-phase compression powered from shore replaces the need to build and operate an offshore compression platform, right? The use of these subsea compression systems as compared to a compression platform in general enables a reduction of more than 50% of the energy consumption, which translates directly into the associated CO2 emissions, right? So if you generalize and say use EPA conversion factors for a system such as the Hjelmeland, this amounts to a reduction of CO2 emissions of more than 2 million metric tons over a period of 10 years. So it's significant value. So in summary, right, the subsea factory and the subsea processing toolbox, if you like, is in my view a true enabler for low carbon production systems. This includes subsea boosting, compression, as well as separation system. And as I mentioned, electrification from shore, but alternatively power supply from offshore wind, as well as other energy sources, really provide additional opportunities for further emission reductions.
Mads, I think as you might attest, the introduction of innovation is one thing. The industry adoption of that innovation is quite another thing. Can you address how the energy industry uptake has progressed in terms of specifying and installing subsea factories to date?
I think on that question, Greg, right? In general, I'd say that adoption has been a bit sluggish, but I think we need to also clarify when we talk about subsea factories, what do we actually mean, right? Because the subsea factory concept has been presented in a number of ways since it was introduced really back in 2012, I believe it was. However, all the scenarios really require the use of modern subsea technology in the form of seabed processing, right? And that includes seabed pumping, compression, and separation. That's really what represents the core of this modern technology, and in my view, the very heart of the subsea factory. So over the years, you know, the vision has evolved to a more flexible and say more versatile subsea factory to suit the different field development needs. And if maybe I can exemplify a bit, right? The Vigdis field development, where Equinor has implemented a subsea boosting or subsea pumping system, is a good example of what we call a brownfield factory. So this is where you go into a field late life and you increase production through late life recovery, but in the most energy efficient way. And I think another example, if we are speaking about Equinor, right, is their Gulfax field, where a brownfield compression factory was deployed and commissioned in 2017, after really a decade of technology qualification and also EPC project execution, right? A final example to move away from the brownfield perspective is really the subsea boosting system deployed in Woodside's Greater Enfield development project in Western Australia, which represents then a greenfield factory solution, right? Enabling a tieback of more than 30 kilometers. So over the past 5 years, we've seen large advancements made in the subsea processing space, and based on more than 2 decades, I'd say, of technology qualification, but also experience and runtime on seabed rotating machinery, the technologies have matured, there's no doubt. And we see a lot more activity in this space, in my view, also coupled, of course, with, say, higher confidence in the operator community. So if we combine these achievements, right, with increasing focus on sustainability, we do expect a stronger drive towards subsea processing.
How has the prolonged market downturn affected the uptake in the industry today?
I think on this question, Greg, right, I'd say there's no doubt that the oil and gas industry, the subsea industry, we were all hit very hard, of course, especially last year with the onset of COVID-19 and the pandemic, and of course the overall significant consequences on the global scale as well, you know. But however, to your question, right, I firmly believe that in this rapidly changing landscape that we're having, right, which is really shaped, in my view, by the energy transition, the focus on value creation really has increased, right? And when I say value creation, it comes down to value creation for the operator, for the owners of the fields, but then also society as a whole. So I think the inherent benefits of subsea processing technology is that it enables increased production and recovery with low incremental investments per barrel. And it also allows the operators to fully optimize their overall infrastructures and facility designs, which really brings significant overall reductions in investment levels when you look at this in totality. And I think finally and importantly, subsea processing has the potential to greatly reduce the carbon footprint for offshore field development. So, you know, if we look at a world where sustainability and the carbon footprint of our operations is key, then subsea factory or subsea factories, let's say, and subsea processing technology represents a significant opportunity.
Obviously, here in the States and globally, there is a renewed interest and vigor in the offshore wind, the offshore renewable industry. Is there a crossover for this technology from the traditional oil and gas to the burgeoning offshore renewable energy market?
I definitely think there is, Greg, and I really base the fact or this on the fact that, you know, oil and gas will remain an important part of the energy mix for the foreseeable future if we look at the forecast from the IEA as well as other analysts, right? But I think I also mentioned it briefly before, right? If we look at some of the initiatives and projects around offshore wind, as you rightly point to, and then you envision, for example, an offshore electricity grid powered by this renewable energy, it serves as one example where a subsea factory can be installed, leveraging renewable energy, really on the road to a zero emission production system, right? So in my view, there are also significant opportunities that, you know, now have a low threshold to realization, as over the past decade plus, a significant amount of building blocks have really been taken forward and qualified, right? So if you put forward an example on this, right, over the past 20 years, we have deployed more than 100 megawatts of subsea processing systems, rotating machinery systems on the seabed. They're all electrically driven. And if we look at this in terms of sort of an electrification perspective, right, we can also see great potential in terms of crossovers.
Okay, no, that's excellent. My next question might be a little bit repetitive because you've already addressed some of the drivers, but in a concise statement, in your estimation, what will be the driver or drivers for wider adoption of this technology going forward in the future?
I think that is a good question, and I think if we look at the subsea industry per se, there are a few sort of imperatives that are familiar to maybe all of us, or most of us at least. As developments will still be required in deeper waters and at longer, offsets or tiebacks. Yeah, the portfolio of fields that are in production, they are maturing, and certain reservoirs are, from nature side, granted low energy, so they struggle with low recovery factors, right? So the fundamental challenge in making projects viable is really the ultimate recovery factor versus the total investment level, right? But I think we all realize also it's not just about project economics anymore, because sustainability does play really a key role in the field developments of the future. So in my mind, wider adoption will be driven by a combination of factors. It's really, of course, the confidence and maturity of the technology offering from a, call it, subsea factory perspective, to use that expression, but then also coupled with the value creation element, where we know that there's increased production and recovery, there's the optimization element, and then finally the sustainability element, right?
Excellent. You've been very kind with your time. I just have one more question. Looking at OneSubsea's body of work to date in this regard, can you point to one project, to one client that you see serves as a great example for the industry to watch?
I think on this one, Greg, maybe I'd like to repeat myself a bit, if you'll indulge me, and I would like to go back to the Hjelmeland Phase 3 development project, right, where AS Norsk Shell is the operator. Bringing subsea compression to market and maturity has been maybe almost an extremely long journey, and I think the interesting thing with the Hjelmeland is that the very early concept development work for this field back in 2001 identified subsea compression, for late life as beneficial. And now, 20 years later, activity is taking place, right? So in many ways, the Hjelmeland can be seen as sort of the cradle of subsea compression, where the idea and concepts were born. Yeah. I mentioned a few parameters of the Hjelmeland Phase 3 project before, but I think the general value proposition in subsea compression, and how it unlocks significant value in the form of increased production is huge, right? If we look at the public domain figures in the case of the Hjelmeland, subsea compression has the potential to enable an increased production of up to 200-300 million barrels oil equivalent, which is contributing to an increase in recovery factor for this field up to 85%, which is significant. I did speak about the energy efficiency benefits of subsea compression versus topside floating compression. However, another aspect is that the gas produced in the Hjelmeland field is exported to the UK and makes up an approximate 20% of the sort of UK's total consumption. So overall, this gas has been a major contributor in making the UK coal-free, as natural gas has replaced coal as a source of energy at a significantly lower carbon density. And if you look at this in the wider context, this has contributed greatly to overall emission reductions from the UK, right, to the tune of approximately 50 million metric tons per year, which is a significant value. So in my mind, to answer your question, brief and concise, I think the value and significance of the subsea compression system, which is planned to be installed in the Hjelmeland field, cannot in any way be understated, for sure.
Okay, well, again, your insights are greatly appreciated. I wish you the best of luck at the UTC event in about a month's time, and I look forward to talking to you again.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Greg. Thanks for having me.